we're moving now into reuse, the bottom line, making reuse add up. So just in the previous conversation, we were talking about the funding gap. I think that's going to be something that's covered here in this as well. This session will be exploring the financial viability of reuse systems, highlighting how businesses can integrate reuse into operations whilst improving profitability and maintaining customer engagement. That's a big subject. Hi. And it's going to be chaired by James Piper, an environmental business strategist, podcaster. I'm sure you've all heard of the Rubbish podcast by now. It's been doing very well. Author of the Rubbish book. It was totally rubbish. No, it was brilliant. And we're proud to say at City2C, chair of City2C's board of trustees as well. So James specialises in helping companies adopt reuse models that drive profitability and market growth. So we're very excited he is chairing this session. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. So yeah, as Matt says, I'm James. I'm the chair of City2C, which I'm delighted to be part of. I'm also the co-owner of Eco Surety, who are one of the sponsors of the event. So we are delighted to sponsor this event. Thank you for the plug for the podcast, Talking Rubbish. So yeah, episode 6 is all about reuse. If you like reuse, we talk about that in episode 6. And it's fair to say we have an extremely passionate panel. So we've had a few conversations about kind of areas we might touch on. And what is very clear is this is an extremely passionate group. And people always put me on a panel just before lunch, and they know I like to talk. So it's like, that's why they make me chair it, because I don't get to say as much. So I'm going to hand over to these guys who know what they're talking about. So we'll do some quick introductions. What I'd really like to do is just understand a bit about you, but also why you're so passionate about reuse. That would be great, or refill.
Hi, I'm Stuart Chidley, I'm co-founder of Reposit. So we are here to create a cross-category reuse system for the benefit of stakeholders. So you may have seen Borrow Cup, which I think we'll talk a bit more about, but we're also launching a reusable beverage bottle system in the UK as a test in the city. And then we're also working cross-category, cross-brand in Canada with some major retailers and consumer product brands. Why am I passionate about reuse? Because my wife, my inspiration, she's the one that came up with the crazy idea of there should be a way to do this, and demonstrated it with Beauty Kitchen in reusable beauty product packaging. But right now, because after 6 years of people trying to do this on their own, on organisations thinking they can solve a systemic problem on their own, we're actually now into collective action. And people want to collaborate, and they've now realised that now is the time to move together.
Amazing. Hi, everybody. I'm Safia, founder and CEO at Club Zero. I'm an architect by training, so I look at the big picture, plus also getting very detail focused. Visionary in many ways. I want to see our cities really evolve and become zero waste. We can't feed the next 50 billion people in single-use packaging, so that's a really big motivation and purpose behind Club Zero's work. We are, at our core, a technology-driven company, so we are mobilizing zero waste at scale. So we've built an entire tech stack to support the transition for brands, asset managers, and governments to roll out now reuse DRS schemes. So we've really gotten to that stage now. So it's very exciting. We've operated across food service, some CPG work, and now we're really looking at the big picture, which is how do we shift this in a monumental way. So really excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Dean van Leeuwen. I'm the co-founder of Tomorrow Today Consulting, and I'm a futurist with a difference. I think I like to think that the best way to predict the future is to create it. So I'm really interested in mega trends and how these trends are changing the world. And then I work with our clients to help them to use those trends to really create a more positive and better future. The reason I'm passionate about eliminating plastic is that about 10 years ago we were working with John Lewis and Waitrose, and we started getting these sort of radar. We have this radar of what's the big trends in the world, and we started picking up plastic as being a really big issue. And we were saying to John Lewis, to the marketing team, you guys have got to do something about this. And they were like, yeah, we're on top of it. We've got our CSR team, they're working on it, speak to them, and just nothing happened. And then a few years later, I think it was Iceland announced that they were going plastic free by 2025. And I started getting these phone calls from Waitrose saying, oh, we need to be doing something, give us a call. And I said, well, I'd love to help you on this, but I've got a slight snag. I'm currently going through chemotherapy and radiotherapy at the moment, so it's going to be a bit difficult. But I said, look, really passionate. I need to do radiotherapy every day now. So why don't we do this? I'll do radiotherapy in the morning. I'll train it into London for the afternoon. We'll have a workshop. We'll go into the evening. We'll do another workshop in the morning, and then I'll train it back to the hospital and do the radiotherapy the next day. And they said, great. So we did all of this. Everyone was really passionate about changing, and we were developing this strategy. And I thought, I'm so in for this. I mean, actually, it gave me a break from worrying about cancer and all that stuff. But I was, so it was great sort of sidestep. But I got frustrated, because whilst they were saying all the right things, we didn't see enough action, enough bold leadership decisions. I'm not taking a knock at Waitrose and John Lewis. I think they're a great organization. They're doing a lot of good things. But there's just so much more that we can do. And 10 years later, we're still seeing plastic is pinging on our radar. It's getting louder and louder. So that's one of the big mega trends that we are seeing. And I want to see business. I'm a big, big believer in business as a force for good, and that we can create really positive change with the power of business. But we've got to be bolder. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm passionate about it.
Thank you, Dean. And absolute inspiration, focusing on refill while you're going through all of that. It's absolutely incredible. And I wanted to start with you, Dean, because I woke up this morning to an email from you about elephants, and I thought, oh, that's a great way of framing the conversation. So it'd be great for you to describe what you sent to me this morning.
Yeah, so one thing we do at Tomorrow Today is we create frameworks to help people understand how the world is changing. And one of the frameworks that we use is called the grey elephants, or the 7 grey elephants of change. Right? Now, we define a grey elephant as a highly probable, high impact, but largely ignored force of change. Okay. Now, COVID, great example. I've been saying to people, leaders for the last 15 years, pandemics will be a disruptive force. We knew they were highly probable. We knew they would have a high impact, but we ignored that. Plastic is the same. It's another great example. It's highly probable. We know what plastic is doing to our environment, our people, the planet. It's the high impact that this will have, but we're ignoring it. Grey elephants, the analogy here is that grey elephants are big, they are scary. They're the elephant in the boardroom. And they're the elephant in the boardroom, and we kind of ignore them. We want to, hopefully somebody else will find a solution for it, or it'll be someone else's job, or maybe it'll go away. But they never go away. Eventually, they get restless, they stampede, they collide, and the world around us changes dramatically. The other thing about it that our research is showing is that grey elephants in many ways are the results of forces of progress. If you think about plastic, it is a wonder material. It keeps our food fresher. It's hygienic. It has wonderful. It allows its humanity to expand, and there's been some wonderful properties on it. But it has a negative side. There's a consequence to that progress. And what happens is, and this happens about once every 100 years or so, you see these grey elephants come together, they collide, and you go through this period of sharp transformation, and the world is never the same again. And that's what we are seeing. We are living. The ancient Greeks had a lovely term. They called it kairos. They said these are rare moments in time. There are opportune moments in time to rethink, to redo things radically. And I think that's where we've seen these grey elephants colliding. They're coming together. They're big, big forces of change. We know about them, but we're ignoring them. And as they collide, the world's going to change dramatically. But there's a real opportunity in that, because the leaders who are tuned to the forces of change during a kairos moment can seize opportunity to create the future. And I think leaders like, I don't want to ask anymore what they think of Trump or whatever, Putin, but they're realizing that the forces are ripe for radical change. And I want to put it to the audience of passionate people about reuse. Now is the time for radical thinking and radical change. So that's about grey elephants. I could carry on all day.
Thank you, Dean. That's great. Thank you. And And I sort of summarised our discussions as a bit of Elvis Presley, you know, a little less conversation, a little more action. I'm not going to attempt to do the impression, but I think it's fair to say, you know, all the panels that we've heard today, it's like, let's just get on with stuff. But there's all these kind of barriers to entry and all these different things that happen in trials that go one way, and it's quite frustrating. And so as we started talking about how do we have more action, less conversation, it was quite clear that even as panelists, we had different views on how that should go forward. So Stuart, obviously you're running Borrow Cup at the moment in Scotland. So it'd be great to kind of touch on that and how you're taking something and kick-starting it and what that's growing into and what it might become. And Safi, it'd be great to get your views as well on this about how we kick-start action.
Perfect, thank you. So I think we've heard from people this morning about, so Margaret, about collective action, innovation, but in the context of a big vision. Catherine in the panel there about theoretical modelling to validate a vision. The recycling example that came up, which is relatively simpler than a reuse system. It's not as much of a systemic change, but it has taken 40 years to implement a recycling system that's still not perfect. And that backdrop, and I think then you heard James talk about the enablers or the distractions of EPR and DRS as potentially a catalyst for reuse. And it's in that context, we're talking about, we live in a financial world. So this panel is about financial viability. We've got perfectly designed single-use system. We are in a capitalist society with businesses who make decisions based on finances. Right now, there is not a financial problem, and EPR and DRS start to add to that financial problem. The environmental problem is not expensive enough to justify why we should move to reuse. We need to prove why it is financially viable to move to reuse. That is not easy to do. So Borrow Cup, the Ottawa project, the Newport project, what we're doing with Marks and Spencer's, is about taking that collective action and innovating and being iterative and being fleet of foot and agile to build the data points to build the financial case of why this is inevitable. So Borrow Cup, just for context, people think, oh great, we've launched Borrow Cup and we've launched this and we've done that and we're 6 weeks in. There are no answers. There are learnings. But we talked earlier about Tesco Loop. It wasn't a failure. We're here talking about this today because of that and because of the learnings from that. And as James said about don't do it alone, collective action, that's why collective action is starting. So Borrow Cup took 3 years of collective action, collaboration, feasibility, design, build, before we even launched it. Yeah, this is long-term stuff. It is going to take 18 months before we have a scalable model. There is no quick answer, so we need to drive uptake, we need to drive return rates, we need to operationalize, we need to build the financial models. But only by doing can we get the financial information and the data to make it believable. Because if I'm a finance director of a major blue chip, I'm not signing a check for $1 billion to transition my business into reuse without the proof from real-world examples. That's just in effect what we're doing.
Excellent. Right. Well, building up on that. So we've launched way too many pilots. So we're kind of like switch off if anyone comes to us saying, can we do a pilot? Like the answer is no. We're on the other side of that. So the good news is that we found an economic development path for governments, asset managers, and brands. But there has to be a key focus. So there is no economic development if you are looking at specific packaging types. I will put my hand up and say that right now. So the food service sector, no economic development as in no upside. It is more expensive. If you want to use reusables, great, do it, but it will be more costly. We've built an entire model to study specifically which particular packaging lines do bring economic development across those 3 key stakeholders. So the exciting news is if you are a glass bottler in any way, you are looking at an opportunity to bring in more of your reuse, take back, and scale that. That is the first particular focus area for a reuse DRS system in the UK, plus in other cities. And why am I saying this, or what has informed this information is what we look at is where are, globally, which cities are showing signs, or there's 4 key stages that show signs that they're ready for reuse. First is mandatory bans, single-use plastic charges. We've all seen that. That's step 1. Step 2, mandatory reporting, where governments are starting to ask industry for a lot of the data, so they're building their data sets. Step 3 is EPR, which is where we are in the UK. In fact, there's about 41 countries globally that are at about EPR stage. So outside Europe, about 6 US states, the UAE, and a bunch of others that are contemplating it, so it's on the fringe of it. EPR is where you're starting to mobilize and capture some sort of funds from producers to pay for your waste management. And the 4th step is DRS. Now, DRS typically is understood as single-use DRS. When people talk about DRS, they're thinking plastic bottles and cans. And in a DRS scheme, you do not have glass because you can't crush glass. It's very expensive to recycle glass. Glass has to operate somewhere outside that. That's where we put our hand up, and this is where we've done our specific unique modeling to understand where is reuse DRS in this entire system. It is in glass. If you are a country and you're rolling out DRS systems, you've already uniquely figured out where that infrastructure exists, where those drop point systems need to exist for somebody to return a can or a plastic bottle. Adjacent to that is a reuse DRS machine, which does exactly that. It incentivizes the consumer to return it for a nominal amount. If you do not incentivize, you do not get high recycling rates. You're simply asking consumers to put things in the right bins. We know that isn't effective. So there's a reason why this plastic reform, or waste reform, as I like to call it, has come out in significant. I mean, I've been doing this for 10 years, so I've seen an awful lot of development over that 10-year path, and I'm very hopeful it's only getting mobilized faster because the economics don't stand up. Governments are spending a lot of money on waste. Waste is not cheap. We, just in England, so you've got to think about Scotland and Wales, we consume about over 100 million tons of waste. We produce it, and that's currently taxpayers' money. So yes, EPR is fantastic. It's going to start paying for a bit of that. I do hope there's some portion of that coming into reuse infrastructure, and that's what's going to support mobilizing reuse systems at scale. But really, glass bottling, if you are filling anything in glass, whether you're a supermarket or whether you are a unique drinks brand, that's where I would definitely initiate conversations. We are launching a roundtable in April and bringing together government representatives, asset managers. So if you are a brand in operating glass, please come and chat to us.
Great. And just as you were talking there, I was thinking, actually, this is really interesting in terms of the financials of refill, which is kind of what we're trying to talk about. Because if I take what James said from Tesco earlier, what I found most interesting is he said we're finding EPR and DRS and all these things to be so admin heavy that we don't have time to talk about refill. And that's just quite an interesting, I'm paraphrasing, that's just quite an interesting thing, because you would hope that EPR and DRS create the business case for refill.
They are.
But if actually that's taking up everyone's time, they don't have time to look at refill. That's just an interesting thing. And I had the same with the glass industry, where they're now, so just in case people aren't aware, glass guys got out of DRS and they're now moving in EPR, and they're frustrated at the cost of EPR, right? And I was on LinkedIn the other day having quite a polite conversation about glass and all this kind of stuff. And they were saying, well, it's going to take 5 to 10 years to be in refill for glass. And I was saying, yeah, but we've known about EPR for 5 to 10 years. I've been talking about the cost of EPR for a long, long time and getting people to mobilize. And I guess my frustration is there is this tendency to wait for legislation to dictate rather than to look at those financial models and go, actually, in 5 years, this is coming and it's going to take me 5 years to set up, so I better start now. So I guess we're now at a point where, in some ways, they're saying that conversation is too late, and that's frustrating. I don't think it is. I guess my question is, how do we help people realize what the issues are going to be in 5 to 10 years' time and make a decision now rather than waiting for legislation to come in effect?
I mean, it's leadership. You've got to show them the numbers. You've got to really sort of lay it out. Otherwise, it's really hard. I mean, what's, I guess, different about how Club Zero is coming into it, we built the full reuse zero waste stack. So we have a complete transparency on and we've developed about 12 packaging lines as well. Some of them are on the table there because we're part of SSPP. So we know exactly how much it costs to engineer packaging, what the traceability tracking system needs to be, what labeling needs to be, what the cost of that is, what the tech stack is, what the cost of that is, what the cost of reverse logistics is, what the cost of washing is. because we've actually built the whole thing ourselves first of all. Now we're saying, okay, great, now we're going to do this specifically for certain brands, specifically for certain materials, because this is how it fits into the UK's wider policy. I know there's a conversation about policy coming up next, so I'm not going to go deep into that, but you have to complement really where government is moving. And so glass is very complementary to the wider scheme that's happening here. So to answer that question, it's the economics. We have that data because we have practiced it for now over 7 years. So we are able to very confidently say, this is the cost of washing. It's not an unknown, and we don't have to go to a third party to ask what the wash costs are. We can interrogate that, certainly, because we've seen it ourselves. We know exactly what it needs to look like. So that's, I guess, a unique position because we've been there, we've physically seen it, and we know where the margins are.
I think this comes back to the grey elephant, right? So the EPR fees were the grey elephant in the boardroom. They knew it was coming, but until they saw the actual numbers, so in the last 6 months, that's when it's actually been discussed in the boardroom because there is an actual number.
Yeah.
And I think this is the point of the theory, right? So there was another report published yesterday, Closed Loop Partners, about the theory of these product categories are the ones that are easiest to transition into reuse, which is similar to the EMF report, similar to what you're talking about. There's another theoretical model. A finance director in a blue chip organization is not going to act based on that information. And I think it comes back to touching on policy, government incentives, so things like the UKRI SSPP stuff has enabled a lot of learning. But there is also a massive disincentive to act first. So James mentioned it earlier. If there is no first mover advantage in this, there is no advantage to building a £120 million new filling facility for reusable bottles if the RVM infrastructure is not being built, if the washing infrastructure is not being built, which is where it has to be collective action and a joined up business case. So with Catherine's work on the future financial state, every individual stakeholder needs to do their own financial business case and then act together. That is not the way business has been run for the last 150 years. That is a state, communist society way of doing things. That is not the way that we are at the moment. So unless this is 100% funded by public money, it becomes very hard to align all those stakeholders. And the only way to do it is with data. Real life data, because my CFO, when I used to work at Boots and Avon and various places, are not signing off even $1 million of investment without the business case.
Yeah. No, I think Ed, you're absolutely right. This is an elephant in the boardroom, and people aren't going to do anything about it until it really becomes painful for them. Or the typical stance is let's just ignore it until it goes away or we're forced to do something about it. The problem with that approach is that the future doesn't just happen. People create the future. So if you're waiting, someone else is going to come along and do it. And the way they do it may not be to your benefit.
Yeah.
Okay. And we always say that if you're waiting for a grey elephant to appear, it's going to be too late to prepare. And I mentioned that there are 7 of these what we call great grey elephants. And over the last few days, I've been looking at reuse, and I've been overlaying the sort of grey elephant lens to understand what it means, because it's really important that you think about, you explore what these grey elephants mean for your business, for your strategy, and then you can start to evaluate it. So one of the grey elephants we call is the rising rage, and it's all about this increase in angry people. We can see people around the world getting really, really angry. And what this tells us is that if people are getting angry about plastic, they're getting angry about plastic waste, the impact on the environment. And these are the people who, your natural champions. They buy into your story. They believe in looking after the planet. So it's an easy sell for them. But even for them, the behavioral shift is quite difficult. But then there's another group of people who are getting angry, and I think this is the backlash that we're going to see in this area as EPR and things like this start coming on board. You've got to watch out for the backlash of the angry people, of this rising rage. That's one of the reasons why I asked James that question about who's going to pay for this. Because when companies and people start to cotton on that this is going to be a stealth tax, this is going to cost them money, this is an administrative burden, they're going to start pushing back. They're going to start saying that this is work, okay? And people are going to buy into the stance that this shouldn't be happening. It's regulatory, it's administration, it's bureaucratic. And I think there's going to be a real pushback of rising rage against these kind of initiatives. So we need to think about how you balance that grey elephant or manage that grey elephant as it moves forward.
Great. Thank you, Dean. Thank you, everyone. I can see the 1 minute sign has been put up, so I'm going to give you 10 seconds each. So if you had 10 seconds on this stage, as in you weren't on a panel, you were told you've got the mic for 10 seconds, what would you like to say to this audience? What would you impart? What would be those final words of wisdom?
Everything starts niche and grows from there. We need to start, but we need to start with realistic objectives. Don't oversell the fact that reuse is going to be mainstream in 5 to 10 years. Just to manage your expectations, it's not. It's going to take a lot longer than that. So no more failing trials and pilots. These are all niche stepping stones to build towards a bigger vision.
I would say there's a huge economic benefit from what we've studied for anyone who's operating in glass. So if you are, come and find me, please, and we'll add you to our upcoming roundtable. We've got government representatives from the Circular Economy Task Force. We've got a number of big real estate asset managers, as well as other beverage brands. So it'll be a really interesting development. We're already doing the same in Singapore. They're a year ahead with their DRS system. It's coming out in April, and you'll be amazed. You should just go online and have a look at how unbelievably organized they are in comparison. But similar roundtables for there, and so we've got loads of learnings on international comparisons on how others are really moving this forward. So it would be lovely to hear from you. Thank you.
So I would say that I don't need to tell you the world's changing. We can look around, we can see how rapidly and fast changing, complex the world is. But I think you'd agree that there's something special about this period of change. Our research shows that this is a sharp, transformative period of change. Within the next 10, 20 years, I think people born during this period won't even relate to the period that their parents and grandparents grew up in. I think children born during this period are going to look back and say, you use plastic, you packaged in this way, why? It's just going to seem, I don't know, barbaric in many ways. And that's in that sense, that's the opportunity for us. The converse to that is that there are industries, there are capitalists out there who are saying we can still make a lot of money out of this. Petrochemical companies know, and then they're shifting their revenue streams, and close on 50% are coming from plastic. They're keeping very, very quiet about this. They're fighting the fuel battle, they're lobbying there and that, but plastic, they're keeping very, very, very quiet. They are wanting to create a future that's more reliant on this as a product. There's a lot going for them to fight and lobby for. I think we need radical thinking, we need radical change, but we are living during a time of radical change, so the opportunity is ripe. I would say if you want to learn more about the grey elephant, I'll be around. You can contact me. If I can plug my podcast, it's Elephants in the Boardroom. Come have a listen. A monthly podcast, and we talk about these big trends that are coming over the horizon and what it means for business. So,
Nice.
Oh, we should have had like a podcast off or something. That would be
Let's do that,
rivalry. So I'm just before lunch. I'll hand over to any questions in the room. Anyone got any questions for the panel?
I have a question for Safia. My name is Steph. I work at Unomi on the circular economy team. We're a Bristol-based. Somebody else already introduced us, so that's fine. You got my attention when you mentioned single-use and reuse DRS. I've heard two schools of thought. In one instance, I've heard that reuse has been used as sort of a reason perhaps not to implement single-use DRS systems within certain countries because it locks us into the infrastructure for single-use recycling type systems. I've also heard people say that actually there's maybe efficiencies to be gained between single-use and reuse DRS systems if they're designed the right way. So
Yep.
in your experience, and I know
Yeah.
we're all learning about this still, and you might change your mind a year from now, but in your experience from what you've seen, do you feel like there's good examples for how DRS systems can be designed to be single-use and reuse and interoperable with each other, or do you find that
They're
there's...
adjacent, first of all, so they're not the
Sure.
same machine. You're not throwing it all in one.
Okay.
They're adjacent. So they're two separate schemes. They're two separate scheme operators. One is waste, one is zero waste. It's very different. Collections are different. The way that you mobilize it, the way that you have take-back systems, very different. So hence, you have two different scheme operators. In the German system, the FAN system, you had actually one. No, you had, I'm trying to remember where they started and where they are now. Now you have two separate ones. But it was a very complex initial system. They realized that there were too many partners. This is one thing I want everyone to take away is not everybody needs to be involved in this. Okay, not every single stakeholder that is in the waste economy is involved in the reuse economy. I just want to say this because it isn't the same party. it looks very different. So the German model, it's not a new business model. Reuse is not a new business model. It's been existing for a long time. But how? So they've done it 30, 40 years ago, and they've done a great job. I would say it's predicated on the technology that existed then. Now we have AI. We have much faster technology that enables all kinds of detection of food allergens, any kind of issues that are pertaining to the packaging. We can detect immediately and have a time-stamped image that can create more security. That's from a tech perspective. So there's loads more that we can mobilize across reuse to make it safe and fast and effective operationally, but it's two adjacent systems. For the reuse DRS system, I think it's ideally a great place to start is obviously glass. I know I'm repeating this. Not everything is reusable. Not everything can be reusable or reused. And so we're trying to create focus because I think if you say, where do we start? Then people don't know where to start. But if you start with glass, okay, we start there. We've built the infrastructure adjacent. We can add other types of packaging items as we go along because the investment's already been made in that existing infrastructure. Hopefully that's useful. Happy to chat more.
Can I just add one thing on? Whilst they're two separate systems, it's the same consumer. So DRS for recycling is key to put value back into packaging. So one of the financial proof points or excuses that's first to everyone's lips is consumers won't return it. So if DRS single use can prove consumer return rates and put value into packaging, it paves the way for reuse.
I will say it's been proved, so it doesn't have to be proved. We've seen DRS pretty much in many countries, so it's a proven model. What other elements I forgot to mention is the DMO is shared, because if you've got a DMO for single use, you have the same DMO for reuse. The action for a consumer is the same. You're not confusing them with, you've got to do something for single use, and then you've got to do something completely alien and different for reuse. So the action from a cognitive perspective, from a consumer's angle, is much more straightforward and simple, which is why I just overlay and I say it's reuse DRS, because it's adjacent and it's very complementary if you've already set up initiative on the single-use DRS.
Hi, I'm Michael Joyce. I'm from Patena. We produce refillable PET beverage bottles for the German market. Really, my question was around the economics of it. So how much more economically feasible does reuse have to be for businesses to make that transition? Do we just need to meet the same level of things, or does there need to be an economic advantage to reuse? Thank you.
I'm really glad you asked that question because I had that on my list and I was running out of time, so I'm really pleased we got that question.
I'm happy to answer it. I'm also conscious I'm talking a lot, so I'm happy to balance that.
I think that's for business to decide, and what impacts the financial cost. So the financial cost of business, your employees, employee well-being, etc. So at what point does social and environmental impact your P&L and your financial decisions? I think the cost parity is mandatory. I think there's potentially a case of it can be slightly higher cost when you look at it. But I think this is exactly the point of, we don't even know the answer to that question. So how do you build the business case to get the investment to get everyone to move together?
I think it just goes back to that point that we were making about, James saying EPR and DRS take up time, so we don't have time to think about reuse. Again, paraphrasing. I think my mission with these retailers and brands is to shift them like I tried to shift the glass guys unsuccessfully. It's like stop focusing on the legislation that's kind of coming down with, immediate and do something that gets you out of that legislation. And I think, the costs of EPR and DRS as such that there is an opportunity for reuse to be a competitor to DRS and EPR. That will and be cost effective because it can compete in those terms. That will only happen if brands and retailers are thinking of it in that way and going, I don't want to pay these bills, these EPR, DRS bills, so I'm going to focus on reuse. But what they're doing, is saying, and DEFRA is saying, well, 80% of the cost should be passed to the consumer. So there's no incentive for them to come out of reuse because it's like we're just going to pass the cost to the consumer and everyone's doing it, so it's all comparative. And I think it's really important that brands and retailers start thinking about reuse as a competitor to those legislations that are coming in and spend time focusing on that.
Yeah, I think if I can just add to that, the economics of this is going to be paramount. But I think we have to look at it quite sort of at a macro level as well as a micro level. And at a macro level, if you think about we look at pollution as one of these grey elephants, and we categorize that under the angry planet. And it's amazing that there are 9 million deaths annually related to pollutions. Plastic is contributed about 1 million a year. And I think the costs are around 1.5 trillion. When you think about those economics, and then you retrospectively fit that back to what it means for our business, for our workforce, our consumers, and so on. And suddenly the economics start to stack up. The problem is they're not hitting the bottom line at the moment. But we've got to figure out how to do that. And just bring this into context, 9 million deaths a year. There were 3.5 million deaths from COVID in the first year, all right? And we threw trillions at that, all right? But something that's creating 9 million, we're just sweeping this underneath the carpet. And in some ways, maybe I'm thinking, there's a danger with plastic and reuse, and you come across, sometimes there's a danger of coming across as kind of a liberal hippie. And I'm pretty sure Musk would have a lot of fine words to describe a group like this today. But I think we need to become more radical in how we are positioning things and how we are raising awareness around the impacts of these poisons and pollution, because then it does become political. The other thing is, if you think about the aging grey elephant, the big challenge for governments is going to be how they cover health costs going into the future. And if you're trying to fight for budget from governments to cover plastics and reuse, and you're fighting against a growing aging population who are demanding healthcare, you're going to lose that battle. So you've got to tie that link into healthcare and the impact of pollution and plastics on healthcare, because suddenly the economics start to make sense.
Thank you, Dean. I'm getting all sorts of hand gestures to say it's lunchtime and we need to wrap up. So I just want to thank our panel for your insights today. I've really enjoyed being part of the session, so thank you so much. So
Thank you.
we have a little round of applause.